An Invitation to Battle, Special Orders 191, a turning point in the Civil War. On the morning of September 13, 1862, Union soldiers conducting routine maneuvers near Frederick, Maryland, discovered a seemingly ordinary piece of paper, one that would have extraordinary consequences. What they found was Special Orders 191, a lost Confederate directive outlining General Robert E. Lee's strategic movements during his Maryland campaign. Realizing the significance of the document, the soldiers quickly passed it up the chain of command until it reached Union General George B. McClellan. The intelligence contained in Special Orders 191 gave McClellan an unprecedented glimpse into Lee's military strategy, including the planned dispersal of the Confederate Army. Armed with this knowledge, McClellan was able to mobilize the Union Army in response, directly leading to the battles of South Mountain and Antietam, two pivotal engagements in the American Civil War. Remarkably, just 2 years later in July 1864, the Battle of Monocacy took place on the very same grounds where Special Orders 191 had been written and later found. While the Monocacy National Battlefield is primarily preserved to commemorate the 1864 battle, it also interprets earlier historical events, including the discovery of Special Orders 191, that shaped the broader trajectory of the Civil War. Lee moves into Maryland, the campaign behind Special Orders 191. Following the decisive Confederate victory at Second Manassas in late August 1862, General Robert Lee seized the opportunity to shift the momentum of the war. With confidence high, Lee led the Army of Northern Virginia across the Potomac River into Maryland. His objective was bold: to draw the Union Army away from Washington, D.C., and to fight a major battle on Northern soil, one that could potentially break Union morale and sway public opinion against the war. Lee's broader strategic aim was even more ambitious. He believed that a Confederate victory in the North would bolster the case for European recognition, particularly from Great Britain. Such recognition might bring diplomatic or even material support to the Confederate cause. In early September 1862, Lee's forces entered Maryland east of the Blue Ridge Mountains, posing a direct threat to both Washington and Baltimore while also seeking to force the evacuation of Union garrisons at Martinsburg and Harper's Ferry. Securing these locations would allow Lee to reroute communications through the Shenandoah Valley and disrupt Northern infrastructure by cutting off key railroads to Washington. On September 4, 1862, Confederate troops began crossing the Potomac. By September 7, the Army of Northern Virginia was encamped at the Best Farm, just 3 miles south of Frederick, Maryland, now part of Monocacy National Battlefield. Despite their ragged and exhausted condition after weeks of marching, Confederate morale remained high. General John Robert Jones noted that the army was dirty, ragged, and ill-provided for, yet many soldiers expected Marylanders to rise in support of their cause. But those hopes were soon dashed. In this largely Unionist part of the state, Confederate forces were met with a cold reception. Only a small number of local men, 130 from Frederick and 40 from Middletown, joined Lee's ranks. Had the army advanced further east or south, where Confederate sympathies were stronger, the response might have been different. While stationed at the Best Farm, Lee learned that the Union garrisons at Harper's Ferry and Martinsburg had not evacuated as anticipated. He quickly adapted his strategy, devising a bold plan to force their surrender by dividing his army. Once those objectives were achieved, Lee intended to reunite his forces and advance north into Pennsylvania, where he hoped to compel Union General George B. McClellan into battle on ground of Lee's choosing. Brigadier General John G. Walker later recounted a conversation with Lee about the risks of splitting the army. Lee's confidence in McClellan's cautious nature led him to believe the Union would be slow to react. Lee reportedly said, "Are you acquainted with General McClellan? He is an able general but a very cautious one. His army is in a very demoralized and chaotic condition and will not be prepared for offensive operation, or he will not think it so, for 3 or 4 weeks. Before that time I hope to be on the Susquehanna." This calculated gamble set the stage for what would become one of the most consequential intelligence finds of the Civil War, Special Orders 191, a lost Confederate dispatch that would soon fall into Union hands and reshape the course of the Maryland campaign. Special Orders 191 and the road to Harper's Ferry, Confederate strategy unveiled. On September 9, 1862, General Robert E. Lee, having met with Major General Thomas Stonewall Jackson, issued detailed operational plans for the Army of Northern Virginia's movements during the coming days. These directives were recorded and distributed by Lee's Assistant Adjutant General, Robert Hall Chilton, in a now famous document, Special Orders 191. Ordinarily, the task of overseeing the administrative execution of such crucial orders fell to another staff officer, Walter Taylor. In his post-war memoirs, Taylor noted that he was not present to supervise the promulgation of these orders. His absence may help explain the irregularities in their distribution and the lack of an expected paper trail, irregularities that would ultimately prove critical. Special Orders 191 outlined Lee's ambitious plan to divide his army in order to neutralize Union forces occupying key positions in the Shenandoah Valley and along the Potomac River. The document meticulously assigned roles to each major Confederate commander over the period of September 10 to 12. Major General Thomas Stonewall Jackson was to lead 3 divisions west through Middletown and Sharpsburg, cross the Potomac River, seize control of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, capture the Federal garrison at Martinsburg, and proceed toward Harper's Ferry. Major General Lafayette McLaws, commanding 2 divisions, was ordered to seize Maryland Heights, a strategic elevation that overlooked Harper's Ferry, and join the effort to capture the Union garrison. Brigadier General John G. Walker, with another division, was to take Loudon Heights to the south of Harper's Ferry, and then support Jackson and McLaws in the joint assault. Major General J.E.B. Stuart, Lee's cavalry commander, was instructed to divide his force. Detached squadrons would accompany the infantry columns, while the main cavalry body was to protect the army's rear, gather stragglers, and monitor enemy movements. Major General Daniel Harvey Hill was assigned the role of rear guard with his division, securing the army's flanks and line of retreat. Major General James Longstreet, along with the rest of the Confederate Army and supply trains, was to advance west to Boonesboro by way of South Mountain. Lee himself would accompany this main force. Once the objectives at Martinsburg and Harper's Ferry were secured, Jackson, McLaws, and Walker were to regroup with Lee's main army, either at Boonesboro or Hagerstown, depending on operational developments. In total, Chilton initially prepared 7 written copies of Special Orders 191 for Jackson, Longstreet, McLaws, Walker, Stuart, Taylor, and a file copy for Confederate President Jefferson Davis. At the time the orders were issued, D.H. Hill was operating under Jackson's command and had received a copy through him. However, because Special Orders 191 elevated Hill to independent command status, Chilton also sent him a separate, penciled copy directly. This additional copy, meant to reflect Hill's new responsibilities, would become the source of a lasting mystery. Hill later claimed he never received Chilton's version and retained only the one sent by Jackson. The copy Chilton sent, however, was the one that Union forces would unexpectedly find days later near Frederick, Maryland. It became known as the Lost Orders, a document that would dramatically alter the course of the Maryland campaign and lead to the bloody confrontation at Antietam. Union Army on the move, the discovery of Special Orders 191. In the aftermath of the Union's crushing defeat at the Battle of Second Manassas, the Union Army in the East was in disarray. General George B. McClellan, newly tasked with restoring order, was responsible for combining his own Army of the Potomac with the battered remnants of General John Pope's forces. As he reorganized this new army outside of Washington, D.C., uncertainty and political tension loomed. General-in-Chief Henry Halleck feared that Confederate General Robert Lee might use the opportunity to lure McClellan away from Washington, then suddenly turn back and attack the capital. McClellan was therefore forced to advance cautiously, balancing the need to track Lee's movements while also guarding the Union's political and military nerve center. By September 12, 1862, McClellan was still uncertain about Lee's intentions. The Confederate Army had evacuated Frederick, Maryland, just days earlier, but its ultimate destination was unknown. Union General Ambrose Burnside led the right wing of the army into Frederick via the National Road and engaged Confederate rearguard forces outside the city. Simultaneously, Union General Jacob Cox's Kanawha Division encountered additional resistance in downtown Frederick. Then, on September 13th, everything changed. The lost orders are found. On the morning of September 13th, soldiers from Company F, 27th Indiana Volunteer Infantry, paused to rest after a long march. As they settled in a meadow near Frederick, several men on the skirmish line made a startling discovery: a piece of paper wrapped around 3 cigars beneath a locust tree. That paper turned out to be Special Orders 191, a complete Confederate operational plan signed by General Robert H. Chilton, outlining General Lee's strategic troop movements for the coming days. The location of the find has been pieced together using several historic sources, including the writings of Colonel Ezra Carman and Corporal Edmund Brown. Carman, who served in the 13th New Jersey during the campaign and later became a leading historian of the Battle of Antietam, conducted interviews and battlefield surveys that continue to inform our understanding of the event. Edmund Brown, a corporal in the 27th Indiana, authored a detailed regimental history, which, although vague in parts, provides crucial first-hand insights. According to Brown, on September 13th, the 27th marched from Iamsville Crossroads toward Frederick, passing familiar landmarks such as the Clay and Hoffman farms where they had wintered previously. The regiment crossed the Monocacy River at Crumb's Ford, a crossing point that lacked a bridge due to Confederate destruction days earlier. After crossing, the men advanced toward the outskirts of Frederick and camped in a field reportedly vacated the day before by Confederate General Dage Hill's division. Multiple post-war accounts and letters confirm that the 27th Indiana began their march at dawn. Major Charles J. Mill noted that they halted in a field about half a mile from Frederick. Private William H. Hostetter recalled the company resting in a meadow near the city limits, and Sergeant John M. Bloss later wrote that the orders were found while his company was on the skirmish line in front of the brigade. According to Bloss, the orders were discovered in a wheat field, under a locust tree, wrapped around cigars. While discrepancies exist among the various soldiers' recollections, understandable given that many accounts were recorded decades after the fact, Bloss' letter, written just 13 days after the event from a field hospital, is considered the most credible primary source. His description aligns with the general location suggested by Carman's annotated maps, pointing to a field southeast of Frederick, likely near the Georgetown Pike. From discovery to command. Once recovered, the orders were passed up the chain of command, first to Captain Peter Kopp, then to Colonel Silas Colgrove, and finally to General Alpheus S. Williams of the 12th Corps. The order's authenticity was confirmed by Williams' acting adjutant general, Samuel E. Pittman, who had previously worked as a bank teller in Detroit. Pittman recognized the signature of Robert H. Chilton from his time handling Chilton's Army paymaster accounts, a remarkable coincidence that gave immediate credibility to the document. Special Orders 191 provided General McClellan with a rare and critical advantage in the Civil War: detailed knowledge of Confederate movements and intentions. It enabled him to launch a rapid pursuit of Lee's divided forces, setting in motion the series of events that would culminate in the battles of South Mountain and Antietam, two of the most pivotal engagements of the entire conflict. McClellan moves based on Special Orders 191, a turning point in the Maryland campaign. By midday on September 13, 1862, Union General George B. McClellan had in his possession one of the most significant pieces of military intelligence of the American Civil War, Special Orders 191. Discovered earlier that day by soldiers of the 27th Indiana Volunteer Infantry, the document detailed the Confederate Army's divided positions and planned maneuvers. McClellan wasted little time putting the intelligence to use. At 3 p.m., he forwarded the orders to his cavalry chief, General Alfred Pleasonton, with instructions to verify whether the Confederate movements outlined in the document had already been carried out. Later that evening at 6:20 p.m., McClellan sent a dispatch to General William Buell Franklin, commander of the Union Sixth Corps, relaying his interpretation of the Confederate plans. He informed Franklin that Pleasonton had already skirmished with Confederate forces in Middletown and successfully occupied the town. McClellan also outlined his strategy. Burnside's command, including General Joseph Hooker's corps, was advancing toward Boonesboro that evening, with General Sumner, Banks, and Sykes' division following closely behind. Franklin was ordered to move at daybreak toward Roarsville by way of Jefferson and Beckettsville. McClellan's objective was clear: split Lee's army in two and destroy it in detail. McClellan was confident, even optimistic, as he reported to President Lincoln. "I have the whole rebel force in front of me, but am confident, and no time shall be lost. I think Lee has made a gross mistake and that he will be severely punished for it. I hope for a great success. I have all the plans of the rebels and will catch them in their own trap if my men are equal to the emergency." Lee, for his part, was caught off guard. He was surprised not only by the speed of the Union Army's advance but also by McClellan's uncharacteristic aggressiveness. After learning post-campaign about the lost orders, Lee acknowledged the impact. "To discover my whereabouts caused him to act so as to force a battle on me before I was ready for it. I would have had all my troops reconcentrated, stragglers up, men rested, and intended then to attack." The timing of the order's discovery was pivotal. Major General Thomas "Stonewall" Jackson's operation to capture Harper's Ferry was already 3 days behind schedule. Had Jackson's forces been on time, the intelligence contained in Special Orders 191 might have already been outdated. But with the operation still underway, the document provided McClellan with an invaluable advantage. His sudden and swift movements forced Lee into unplanned engagements at South Mountain and, shortly thereafter, at Antietam, depriving the Confederate commander of the opportunity to choose his battlefield or timing. The legacy of the lost orders captivated Civil War veterans and continues to intrigue historians and enthusiasts alike. While some aspects of the story remain clouded by post-war recollections written decades after the fact, one truth stands out: McClellan used the intelligence to move with unprecedented urgency and precision. His actions disrupted Lee's strategy, halted the Confederate advance into the North, and ultimately set the stage for the Battle of Antietam, the bloodiest single-day battle in American history. The discovery of Special Orders 191, combined with the delay at Harper's Ferry, quite literally changed the course of the Maryland campaign and, perhaps, the Civil War itself. For the men of the 27th Indiana, the weight of what they had found must have only become clear in the days that followed, as their army closed in on a divided enemy. If you found this deep dive into Civil War strategy insightful, make sure to subscribe to History Love for more untold stories and game-changing moments from history. Leave a comment below. What do you think McClellan should have done next? Stay curious. Stay informed. This is History Love.